The Dr. Terri Show is presented by Evexias Health Solutions. Evexias Health Solutions is an emerging leader in the integrative medicine on a mission to positively impact people's lives through the transformation of healthcare. Evexias educates and trains practitioners on the new, innovative, integrative therapies that support a preventative care model that drives vitality as you age. You can learn more about Evexias Health Solutions and many of the healthcare topics we discuss on the Dr. Terri Show at Evexias.com. That's Evexias.com, as well as find a provider near you. Now here's today's episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Terri Show. I have a really special guest today, one of my patients, Stacy Watson. She is really blessed me by saying yes to coming onto the show and talking about her breast cancer journey and just what she went through from diagnosis to treatment and to aftercare, and how she got from where she was really just in a place of despair to a place of just reclaiming and recovering her zest for life. So join us in this conversation as we talk to Stacy and dispel some of the myths also about hormones and breast cancer. Okay, Stacy, thank you so much for really just being courageous enough to come on today and talk about your journey. Your journey with breast cancer is and isn't unique. The part that's not unique is that you're so young. You don't have a genetic predisposition. You were tested for all the breast cancer genes that would increase your risk. And I want to talk about that in a minute. But before we just start, we're going to talk today. We're going to focus primarily on this misinformation between breast cancer and hormones, as far as when a woman gets breast cancer, or that, it's basically you can never have hormones again. And I know that's what so many women are told, and it crushes my heart because it's just not true. And you were told that for a while too, but just start with your story of, how this was discovered, the diagnosis, the treatment, just that whole journey. And if I need to interrupt you for clarity, I will, but I just want to know your story. And I know so many people want to know your story because it is a story of, here you were, and you're so young, you're facing a potential lifetime of feeling the way you ended up with after they did all the treatments. And that is in and of itself depressing. Mm-hmm. But then where you got to, so.
Okay. Well, I was diagnosed with breast cancer 6 days before I turned 45. And it was actually the day that my oldest turned 16.
Wow.
And so we didn't say anything to anybody for a couple of days. I actually found a lump in my breast when I was working out. Felt like maybe I had pulled a muscle or something, mm-hmm. but it really didn't go away, and it didn't really hurt. It was just one of those feelings that, hey, you might want to get this checked out. Right. And so I finally did. I started my birthday month off by getting a mammogram, and
that's fun.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. I could tell by the look on the person's face that was doing the scans that something wasn't right. And she said, well, they're going to want to do some sonograms right after and maybe do a biopsy. And I said, okay. I knew something was there, so mm-hmm. I wasn't surprised. She scanned over the right breast, and I could see the lump. Mm-hmm. I was always one of those skeptical people, like, mm-hmm. oh, maybe they just mm-hmm. misdiagnosed people.
Right.
But in my case, I knew that wasn't what was going on. Right. Yeah. I could feel it. I knew, and I could see it on the screen. So what was a surprise was finding out I had 2 more in the other breast.
Wow.
But they were different than the one that I had felt. And so we spoke with someone. They called my husband back to talk a little more. I needed them to explain it. Just I didn't feel like I could relay exactly what they were saying, because you don't want to hear that.
Absolutely.
Even if you're semi-prepared for it, you don't want to hear it. So they went through everything with him, and we asked questions. They wanted to schedule a biopsy like the next day.
Yeah.
So it was just boom, boom, boom.
Right. And it's moving so fast. Like, you don't even have time to...
And then it was, of course, a weekend. So you have to wait for the results, and then everything populated on my chart, which is the way that the labs posted for me to be able to see. So I actually found out before I got a phone call from a doctor.
Right. Which is good and bad.
At the time, I was a school teacher, and we were having a staff meeting, and I saw the message pop up, and they were like, go check it, go check it.
Yeah.
So, of course, I have this look on my face, and they were like, just leave. You don't have to stay here for this. This is not important anymore.
Right.
Like, your life just changed. And I'm like, okay, but it didn't. I'll be fine. And, you just try to go through and act like everything's fine. But long story there, but the biopsies showed HER2 positive, which meant that I had an estrogen receptor that was triple positive, actually. All the little different things. I've tried to tune it out and not really pay attention. You research and look for things that
so confusing.
Are different solutions than chemo when you're going through that. And I had seen relatives that had gone through it, and my mom had gone through it as well. Hers was not HER2. It was a different mutation. She had also lost her mother before she was 50. Her mom was 50. I was a newborn.
From breast cancer?
It originally started with ovarian cancer, and then it came back and was everywhere. So
wow. Yeah, that's how ovarian cancer is usually found.
Yeah. I could not tell you how my mom's started. I was running a business at the time and didn't give her as much attention as I probably should have. But she was definitely a rock for me. But she was very much a firm believer in chemo and
traditional.
Yeah. But I had already done a couple of rounds of hormone therapy and pellets with a different company, and I was really excited that I was no longer having hot flashes, and I felt like I, was just having the time of my life with my husband, and everything was wonderful. And then boom. So we ended up seeing an oncologist that was recommended just from all the doctors that were involved with I guess with the
breast surgeon.
Yeah. So we went and saw her. I was not really a fan. It was hot in there. I just already didn't want to talk about any of the things that they were going to talk about. But she said, do you know a whole lot about breast cancer? And I'm like, well, I know what I have seen it do to people, and it kind of is very destructive. I said, but I'm really, looking for all of my options, and I want to know like where I'm at. So it turns out I was stage 1. They didn't know at the time that it hadn't gone to the lymph nodes yet, but it did not.
Yeah, that's
thankfully. So I did catch it early, even though I sat on it for a couple of months going, maybe it'll go away, but it didn't. But she said, all of the reasons that you're doing hormone therapy, we're going to strip that away. So your libido, your
mood,
your
energy,
your hot flashes, all of that, everything's going to be stripped away, and we're going to just try to kill cancer. But, it's very important that you get on this now. You don't have time to dilly-dally around. And that phrase is just stuck in my head. I'm like, dilly-dally around. Okay. She was not very nice. But I wasn't receptive to anything, and I don't know that she could have said anything that would have sugarcoated it anyway.
Yeah.
Because to me, the treatment, or the thought of the treatment and what it does to people, in my mind is just so more destructive than the disease itself.
Absolutely.
But I'm like, can't I just, eat differently? And I'm like, I was kind of okay with the surgery part. Careful what you wish for, because sometimes it happens. I had wanted a little breast reduction at the time, but I didn't want it that way. So
yeah. So what did your treatment plan end up consisting of? Did you move forward with the chemo and surgery, and what all was that like?
Unfortunately, I did move forward with the chemo. Maybe it was beneficial, maybe it wasn't, but I couldn't find any other alternative. Except for somebody had kept telling me about flying to Florida to get some kind of tea. I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. I need like tangible
evidence. Yeah.
And I like when you're searching for solutions for HER2 positive, because they scare you and say this is a fast growing type of cancer. It's not like a regular cancer. 10 years ago, this was a death sentence until they came out with Herceptin. So they really did a good job of putting the fear in our family. And I have two small, younger boys. I have, like I said, at the time, a 16-year-old and a younger boy too. So it was very important to them that I fight and
absolutely
show them that I was doing everything I could, but I couldn't find another option. But they were telling me, these are your options. Like, I'm not hearing any other options. They recommended 6 rounds of TCHP, which was like Taxol and
other chemo cocktails.
Herceptin. It was lovely. So I did lose my hair. That lasted we started in April, and I had my last treatment right before school started. So I guess August was the last treatment.
And this was a couple of years ago?
This was 2022.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And then did you move forward with full mastectomies? And did they do hysterectomies? Did they just take everything hormonal out of your body?
We did the double mastectomy. I had already had a partial hysterectomy where we took the uterus out. This was in 2015, and that was due to a herniated disc in my back. So I think all of that kind of played together there. But so I do still have my ovaries, and no one ever suggested taking them out, which was different than my mom's diagnosis. When she had her mastectomy in 2014, they went ahead and took out the ovaries as well. But she was in her 60s. I don't know if that was part of the reason.
Already postmenopausal. Yeah. Premenopausally anymore, they don't recommend that because we know our hormones are so beneficial. So you went through all of that. You went through the chemo, and then, I know, your husband and I have had a lot of conversations, and when he came into our space and listening to me talk about breast cancer, and how beneficial testosterone therapy is for breast cancer survivors, and also even estrogen, considering you had mastectomies, there was no lymph node involvement. And I think that's what happens with women that have a story like yours, where they didn't have any metastatic disease. The cancer didn't spread, and everything's gone. All the breast tissue's gone. You've done all the chemo, now what? And I think the message is to most women and was to you is you can never do estrogen again. You can never do hormones again. And as young as you are, that's a death sentence in a lot of ways, I would imagine.
It is. Not only do they kill the cancer, they also kill everything else in your life. Your mental health, your drive, your ambition, any goals. I mean, everything shut down. And I honestly got to the point where I just could not see how to move forward. And if it weren't for my husband and my children, who knows? Yeah. It's a bad space to be in, and nobody wants to cycle there.
Right.
They wanted to continue after the surgery with another year of therapy. but they weren't doing scans or anything. And I'm like, why are we still pumping poison in whenever it's gone?
Right.
Clean margins. I did another type of test. There were no...
PET scans were normal.
Yeah, there were no cells in any blood tests that were run. So when Scott came home from attending one of your trainings, he said, there's still hope here.
Yeah.
I think that you can get everything back. You can do therapy again, and it's actually preventative.
Absolutely.
For things coming back. So
absolutely,
you might want to do a little research in this area and start looking at it. So,
yeah. And I remember, and it reminds me also of a really great book. If there's, people in the audience that want to read a little bit more about this, there's a really great book written by a doctor, and it's called Estrogen Matters. And he was actually an oncologist whose wife went through breast cancer. Very similar story. And he just was watching the woman he knew and loved and married turn into someone else he didn't know. And slowly, like a flower, just withering and dying. And the message that he would always give to his own patients when it was happening to him and his wife, and he saw the personal side, he said, something's not right here. We're doing something really wrong with this. Let's take a look. He started researching estrogen and found so many studies that showed estrogen didn't cause or worsen or breast cancer. In fact, we talked about this just recently. You attended a training, and you probably heard us talk about estrogen has now been shown in a 2020 paper in JAMA, not only to prevent breast cancer, but prevent mortality, which means death from breast cancer. And that was a synthetic estrogen. That wasn't even the real good estrogen their body makes. And so many people don't know this. We're throwing this estrogen baby out with the bathwater and going, you can never have it again. But besides the quality of life, which you've described, you were, when I first saw you, my heart just, this bright, smiling person sitting here is not the person that I sat across from less than a year ago, I think, or about maybe.
It was last July.
Yeah, it was about a year ago.
The first time.
And so that makes my heart so happy. But really getting this information out there that estrogen isn't a bad thing. You said it earlier before we started. Why aren't we looking at, we talked about this with Dr. Laval. Why aren't we looking at the soil that this stuff is growing in? Mm-hmm. You said, what about my stressors? What about my life? What about the stressors that my mom went through while I was in the womb? Like, you're thinking about all these things, and it's so right. For all intents and purposes, you're thin, you're fit, you're healthy, you exercise, you eat healthy. Like, you got to be asking yourself the question, why me? As so many women do. So understanding that now, one question that's probably coming up, if there's any clinicians listening or patients that, or people listening that have had breast cancer, well, why, if that's the case, why are we recommending these therapies? Why are we telling women they can never get estrogen? Well, there's a thing called standard of care, and it takes about 13 years for the medical community to catch up with the studies that have come out. So if the 2020 JAMA paper came out that says estrogen does not only not cause breast cancer, but it actually lessens death from breast cancer in women who are on it when they get breast cancer or have, are not menopausal. It's going to be, that's 2020. So we're looking at 2030 to 2035 before we start shifting the way we treat. Mm-hmm. And it's important for women to understand that. But there's an even more important conversation if most doctors aren't down with keeping a woman on estrogen after breast cancer, is testosterone. And testosterone not only has been shown to decrease breast cancer, but also be preventative in many studies. Mm-hmm. There's you've heard us talk about Dr. Rebecca Glazer, who's a breast cancer surgeon who uses testosterone pellets in her breast cancer survivors, has so many clinical studies on her website, Glaser, Dr. Glaser. And, learning from her was really so powerfully life-changing for me because it allowed me to start having these bold conversations with patients like yourself. So here you are, you've gone through everything. How long were you? About a year through those? Because when I first saw you, you had finally decided to stop the chemo drugs, correct?
Correct.
Because you were like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And now how do I claw out of it? And, thankfully, your amazing husband came and listened to our lectures and came home and said, hey, you might want to have this conversation. Thinking back to that July when you first came to me, tell me what was happening in your life then and the transformation out of that. I think we started conservatively because initially you were a little nervous about estrogen.
I was, because they
drilled it into your head.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The fear was there.
Yeah.
We started with just testosterone, and I think I felt like I needed a little something else. Something was missing
still.
Of course, I was trying to get back into the workforce. Mm-hmm. And like I said, at the time I was a teacher, and I had gone back into teaching, but I was in a different role and learning a new job. So not only am I trying to climb out of this pit from death and just get my brain working again, I'm trying to learn new information. And I just felt so out of whack, and I felt like I had an elephant sitting on my chest. And I told you that something wasn't quite right, and could we look at it a little more, just what are my options? And I know you consulted with another doctor, and I'm so grateful for both of you collaborating and sharing ideas and listening to me. When I said, this is helpful, but we're not quite there yet. So just tweaking and getting everything just right for me, because it's not a cookie cutter thing.
And it takes a while.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a one and done. It's an art. There's an art to hormone therapy, especially somebody whose body's been as poisoned as yours was.
Yeah.
And
going from -0.
Yeah.
Each time was a little bit better. And like I said, I'm a year out and I feel better than I did before the diagnosis. And I felt pretty darn good then. Yeah. So I am eating better.
Right.
I am incorporating different things to reduce stress.
Absolutely.
I get to work from home right now, which is pretty great. And constantly researching for my own job, but also still researching and trying to find ways to help other people avoid this journey. It's not anything you wish on anyone. And my hope is that someday doctors will look at this early enough before you have a diagnosis.
Yeah.
But when you go into your oncologist, not your oncologist, your gynecologist, and just do your well checkup. It should be a well checkup, a preventative thing, and not having to go to them and say, oh, by the way, I found something.
Right.
I'm not one of those people who like to ever go to the doctor. Because
you're saying exactly what we've laid out in so many of these shows is this reactive healthcare model versus a proactive healthcare. That's exactly what you're talking about. And how can we go into for a woman's primary care provider is her gynecologist, right?
Sure.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And how can we go into a primary care provider and work on ways to mitigate disease that is whole body? You hit the nail on the head. Stress, the gut. What there's things that we think we're doing pretty well and we're pretty healthy, but there were things probably that you've realized in your life. You just said mitigating stress is a huge one. Stress and cortisol play a big role in all chronic disease and inflammation. I love what you're saying about that. And along those same lines, what are some things that you would love for, women listening, even men, anybody listening to this, because we all know somebody who's journeyed through this. What are kind of some of I would say the top 3 to 5 things that you would want someone to know based on what you went through?
People always told me to do your research. It's so important for people who have gone through this journey to talk about it and not shy away from it. And I have had several friends that were diagnosed with cancer about the same time, and they clammed up and didn't want to say anything. Mm-hmm. And there I was sharing my ugly journey, and not for sympathy, but for accountability and perseverance, mm-hmm. and just kind of trying to keep my mind strong. I would recommend to women, please don't stay on certain synthetic hormones that, mm-hmm. Like your birth control pills and things like that. Your anxiety medications, I think all of those wreak havoc on our bodies. Mm-hmm. And
100%.
They tell us those things are safe when you're pregnant, and maybe they're not quite so safe. Mm-hmm. What we do to our bodies matters. What we say to ourselves matters.
Oh, yes.
People can tell you all day long, have a positive attitude. But if you don't know how to do that when you're mm-hmm. being, when you're receiving all of the drugs, then it's hard and it's too late. But obviously, get your mammograms early. Mm-hmm. Try to prevent as much as you can. But talk to your gynecologist. Ask about different hormone therapies. Introduce them to
the book.
Evexias, to you. Yeah, to the book. Drop a book off.
Right.
If you know about it, if you are doing preventative care early, mm-hmm. then you're just that much further ahead of the game. If you have had cancer, or even if you're elderly, mm-hmm. if you have a mom or a sister or somebody, share your journey with them. More the story. Don't take a doctor's protocol at face value. Mm-hmm. There's more out there.
Yeah.
Ask questions. Trust your gut.
Yeah.
If something's not feeling right, it's probably not right.
Yes,
for you.
We don't give enough credence to our intuition. Especially women. Women have powerful intuition about things, and it is true. That is one of the reasons I wrote this book, is to dispel a lot of those myths. Mm-hmm. There's a whole chapter on estrogen, all the hormones. I talk about breast cancer. I talk about the gut. And, so many things that we've talked about on the show. One of the things you said that's so important that I think is a challenge is talk to your primary care provider, talk to your gynecologist. But the problem is so many of them don't know, because we're only taught what we're taught, right?
Well, and they're the doctor and you're the patient, and they have the education. And
yeah. But oftentimes, as far as preventative measures, it's just not taught in our curriculum for medical school and nurse practitioner school and PA school. It's just not taught. So really looking for somebody that has done advanced trainings in integrative wellness and preventative medicine and even advanced hormone optimization, and understands these concepts that a breast cancer diagnosis should not for women mean my life is over. And for so many women, that's what it means. I had a patient one time that comes to mind, and she did everything. She was, thin, fit, active, just not the typical diagnosis that you see. Well, it's all over the place with breast cancer, but we do know that type 2 diabetes and being overweight obviously greatly increases your risk of breast cancer. But she found a lump. And, I was like, we need to get a mammogram. And, of course it was breast cancer. She went, to the breast cancer surgeon, and oncologist, and she did the whole thing. She did a double mastectomy, and she did have a positive lymph node, so that's not really ever fun to think about. And that just means the chance for it spreading is much higher. And she sat down with the oncologist, and I'll never forget this story. And the oncologist said, okay, well, we need to put you on tamoxifen, and we're going to do these rounds of chemo, and we're going to we're going to do this, this, and this, and this. Mm-hmm. This was actually the breast cancer surgeon, not the oncologist. And she stopped and she looked at her and said, I want you to take your doctor hat off and talk to me like I'm your sister. Would you recommend those things? And she looked at her and said, no. And she said, thank you for your honest answer. And so she went on this journey of researching and, the relationship between sugar, and she, did all kinds of, a lot of things that we've been talking about on other shows with increasing your body's immune response, so that one little cell that got out there in that lymph node, which they removed, the lymph node wouldn't have an opportunity to go and plant itself somewhere and divide and grow. And it's been 7 years since her diagnosis, and she's still cancer-free. She never had chemo. She never did tamoxifen. She did a ketogenic diet, primarily no refined sugars, no processed foods, tons of antioxidants. Found out she wasn't a methylator, started taking methylated vitamins, which increases glutathione, and, just really giving her body what it needed to fight. And that's a preventative approach. We've talked about this. We've talked about this in other shows. That's a preventative approach. So, let's not throw that hormone baby out with the bathwater. And the last thing I'll say about it, which I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to take care of you, not only because I love seeing your bright eyes, and I can't even tell you, I wish I had a before picture. I have it in my mind.
I have a few.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But how important estrogen is for disease prevention. I mean, you heard me teach about it just a few weeks ago with preventing Alzheimer's disease and strokes and heart attacks. And this is shown in the studies. This isn't just my opinion. It is, I have hundreds of clinical studies in this book. But how preventative it is for all of those things. So one of the things that happens when our oncologists get tunnel vision and are only focusing on that cancer, they're not looking at the rest of the body and the impact of these recommendations for lifetime. Mm-hmm. You're just trading one thing for another.
Right. What kind of quality of life do you want?
What kind of marriage am I going to have? What kind of wife am I going to be? What kind of mother am I going to be? What kind of friend am I going to be? What kind of teacher am I going to be? It's not the same. So, wow, an amazing story. I'm really blessed to know you. I'm grateful that you said yes a few weeks ago when I said, please come on and will you talk to our audience, because there's so many question marks around this conversation. And I have many stories of other breast cancer survivors that have come to see us and have similar stories. So really grateful to you and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.